Good evening. Welcome to Hump Day. It's Wednesday, Hump Day. Um, been trying to decide what I want to kind of film for different days of the week, building a schedule, and I kind of want to leave Wednesday to be up in the air, spur of the moment kind of filming. And um, today at work, I was just thinking about certain things, and it came up in a conversation talking about accents and. I've been doing some reading on accents and acting and film and such, and I had learned a kind of interesting fact based on the measurement scale of fans and such judging poor performances of failed accent attempts. For example, like a lot of English people voted, and even American viewers and such voted that Keanu Reeves' performance in his Dracula film using the English language accent was pretty awful. Apparently, I'm like, I don't know. I'm not familiar with that film. Uh, I think it might. Is that the one? I think that might be the one with Gary Oldman. But um, they said like the only thing he really tried to attempt was the soft R. So, and I get that. I mean, it's hard doing accents and such. But I think an advantage I have to pick up accents, especially working with like dialect coaches in the future, is I'm a very impersonating individual, and just as in general, like that's why I've been doing this whole time. I haven't been like in theater or in student film or something. I've been just hanging out with my friends or family, quoting movies, trying to sound like the character that I'm trying to impersonating, even switching in the scene between one or two, male or female, it doesn't matter. I still tried. um, and then of course coming along when I'm doing this, I've also done a lot of self research and looked up like Dana Carvey when he's talking about when he tries to impersonate somebody, especially the biggest part of their impersonation is their voice. You get down their voice, then you get down how they deliver their lines, whatever they're saying, and like what they do with their hands or the way they look, or like Kevin Spacey. If you watch some of the greatest impersonation videos, Kevin Spacey does like 20 some different people. I mean, yeah, very skilled. Like his Johnny Carson's amazing. Like when he's like two slippery cooks or yeah, two slippery hookers of the hooker crook. Like he's all doing or he does the whole bit about the Halloween and my ex-wife. Anyway, Dana Carvey. One thing I kind of latched onto was when he was saying when you're impersonating someone or you're trying to learn their impersonation, it really comes down to just one word or one syllable, the way they say it, and they're so unique saying it. And the reason I think that's kind of important is you can't. Um, it's really hard to just study an accent by an individual person, just impersonating that person. So, like, if you wanted to learn English accent, you can't just look at just Michael Caine because the way he speaks, he even says it himself in his own interviews, is he created his own kind of accent by just the years of the way he almost designed his own speech impediment. Um, which he's talking about how like he wanted to typecast himself as a like a kind of a blue collar Cockney Englishman, and so he wouldn't let his mouth open all the way. He would only let it open so far when he's pronouncing a word, and then he would speed up his speech. So between faster frequency of the words and not allowing the full mouth to open for some of the pronunciations, he created his own accent, which is very interesting. And so when I try to impersonate his scenes, the word that I always seem to latch onto the most was stounce. The way he said precious stounce, right? You get your pitch and stuff once you get going and you kind of lock it on, because I mean that's the thing about impersonation that's very struggling for me, is a true test of how well you can impersonate a character is you have the accent or the way their voice sounds, the speed and the way they speak, the fluctuations, and then also you can talk about things outside of what you've heard them say before, like unique dialogue. You can literally just carry a conversation as that person. And that's very hard, especially Michael Caine. It's taken me a while, and I'm still not even close. um, but that's what practice is for, of course. Like, the only voice I really kind of have locked down, I would say, is Arnold. Like, because like I worked on his first name, the way he says his first name, because for me, he he doesn't pronounce the R like an R, right? Ah. He makes it sound like an H, so it's Arnold. And then he has that weird like roll in the back of the neck, or I don't even know how to describe it, but that's what it sounds like to me. And for me, it's almost like I'm like turning my nose off. Like when he's like, "Listen to me, these are my ideas, and I'm not gonna give them out here." It's like I don't feel like I'm using my nose. I feel like I'm turning it off, like putting a block in front of it. Um, get down, there's a bomb, get out of there, like that's what he sound like, that's what it sounds like to me, and so that's what I kind of generate. um but for Michael Caine, there's just so many different intricacies that I have to like try to pick apart to learn that role and that voice. I mean, and I'm the scene I want to do and sound just like Michael Caine is when he's talking to Bruce Wayne and he's describing the kind of character or the personality of the Joker, because he fears Bruce Wayne doesn't understand what the Joker's true motivations is. See, he he latches on to the idea, or not latches on, but his wisdom speaks that the Joker doesn't have a real MO. It's just anarchy. It's just non-order. That's what he wants. Just complete wing it style and form. Everything he does, all of his machinations are just to break order. And so he's talking about that, Batman goes on, he's just like, you know, this is different, Alfred. He's like, they crossed the line. They've gone too far. He's like, no, you've crossed the line, sir. He's like, you've battered them and beat them to the point of desperation. And in their desperation, they turn to a man that they don't fully understand. And then Batman, of course, starts walking away. And he's all like, as he's typing in on a keyboard to open up the locker for his suit. And he's like, criminals aren't complicated, Alfred. I just need to figure out what he's after. And then Alfred's like, with respect, Master Wayne, perhaps you don't fully understand this man either. And this is why I really enjoy the character, the voice, the actor, and everything, is when he starts speaking, and Christian Bale did such a good job as Bruce Wayne to acknowledge his voice and the way he's talking and the wisdom that's being delivered to him. Because at first he starts doing his thing, starts fiddling with the locker, and then he turns and completely is captivated by what he's saying. And of course he has to pick up his volume because Wayne walked away, and he's just like, a long time ago, I was in Burma. My friends and I were working for the local government. They're trying to buy the loyalty of tribal leaders by bribing them with precious stones. But their caravans were being raided in a forest north of Rangoon by a bandit. We went searching for the stones, but in 6 months never met anyone who traded with them. Then one day, I see a child playing with a ruby the size of a tangerine. The bandit had been throwing them away. And then Wayne looks at him and is like, why go through all the trouble of stealing? Because he saw it as good sport is all. Some men don't see the logic in money. They can't be bought, bullied, reasoned, or even negotiated with. Some men would rather watch the world burn. And that's another word I locked into when I heard him. Burn. It's almost like bun, but with a little bit of an R in there. Burn, right? Some men would rather watch the world but, right? And then another word, the third word I kind of locked into on the way he does say it is never. But I mean, that's work in progress, obviously. Arnold, I feel pretty confident in. At one point, I tried to mix a little bit of an Irish accent with Arnold, and it was the most alien sounding thing I've ever heard come out of my mouth, and my ears even acknowledged it. And I just stopped. I was like, what did I just create? I can't replicate it right now, but I'll practice it and see if I can bring it up in a video in the future. But using Dana Carvey's skills and what he said about how because I mean, he impersonates a lot of people. Like he's talking about in an interview I was watching where he would always hang out with his friends and they'd be smoking, they'd be hanging out, drinking, doing their thing, and he was always the entertainment value of the group. And he created this skit that he could just literally bullshit about for like 40-50 minutes, and his friends are just captivated, entertained, and it's just it fills the void of time while they're doing whatever activity. And he's talking about this scene where the Kennedy brothers are with Elvis Presley and Adolf Hitler in a bunker under Las Vegas. And you're just like, what? Right? You're just blown away by this. But he's just like, he starts as Elvis like, hey, everybody, I'm gonna put on a dress, go upstairs and get some donuts. Anyone want to come? Right? And then he goes into Kenny. He's like, nah, I'm gonna stay and teach Adolf how to read the blue book. Adolf, see, spot, run. I don't even know what he says in German. He will never learn, Bobby. Right? Like he just like the way he impersonates things is so entertaining because he always creates stories with it too, which shows demonstrates his skill. But that's why I watch on his interviews and stuff, see if I can pick up some tips and tricks that help me move my craft. And another accent that I've always really, 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 really wanted to lock in on was Australian. You're Aussie. I worked at a coffee shop for a little while, and we had a Aussie married couple that moved up here, and she's into marketing and stuff, and he's an artist. But he always walked in, he always was like, ice latte, right? Because that's what he liked, and sometimes we'd strike up a bit of conversation, depending on how fast and time frame he had. But over a while, not just me, but our entire staff, we kind of picked that up, and we're like, oh, hey, James, ice latte? And he's like, yeah, ice latte, thanks. Right? It was kind of cool. It's like one of those things. It's like you just, as a culture, especially in a customer service culture, you pick up their way they say something, so that you could say it that way to where it just helps blend the communication, I guess. You know what I mean? There's no barrier. But I was watching a YouTube video. I always watch YouTube videos on anything I can on like a little techniques for this, or a scene, a good monologue or something. Or just because of the way my mind works, it's kind of like a jukebox, but for movies. I'll have a scene that's been playing in my head and I just want to watch it again. So I'll just watch like specific scenes of different movies, and I'll catch myself for like an hour or two just sitting there surfing through YouTube, watching movies I've seen like 100 times, but just watching those little specific scenes. But this guy had a 4-tip trick to speak and sound not necessarily like completely Australian, but it gives you the basis to where then you expose yourself to more words of the vocabulary in that language or that accent. And he said, like tip one is words like mic, fight, light, right? With that one I vowel in there and then some sort of consonant. He said, treat that I sound like oi from oil. Cut the L off of oil. So it's, instead of like, it's loik. Instead of mic, it's moik. And the first word that came to my mind, and I hope everyone else had the same epiphany, is crikey from Steve Irwin. Because if you look at it, it's actually spelled C-R-I, C-K or K-E-Y, right? But there's no O-I in there. But he's like, crikey, looky there, that's a tiger, right? tiger, another one. He always said toiga, right? So that was like, well, that's solid. That makes sense. All right. 2, he's like, they're like English because, they were a penal colony and all that such, but they pronounce the R and T differential just a little bit different. So instead of butter, like in English would kind of sound like, where you hard pronounce T's, soft pronounce R's, they almost turn the T's into D's. So it's butter, right? I'm like, that makes sense. I can get behind that. And he's like, of course, you're gonna practice scripted dialogue until you can branch out and improv it. The 3rd tip, he said, which it resonates with me because I call it hick speak, where you sound like hick, like you're from the country or from the South. We don't pronounce G in INGs. So instead of fighting, it's fighting. They be fighting, They're very similar. They don't pronounce the G's. They drop the G. So like instead of saying, it's saying, right? And then the last tip he gives is you add an inflection at the end of your sentence. You kind of like elevate your pitch a little. And so he says you pick a phrase like, all I'm saying is, where's the butter, right? So then you change it into Australian. Oh, it's like, all I'm saying, where's the butter, right? Like, all I'm saying is, where's the butter, right? And you can kind of start to get that accent. I'm like, that's so cool. I'm just like eating this up. Like, all I'm saying is, where's the butter? And then you just keep practicing until you can kind of branch out. Like you can do like a little Steve Irwin bit. That's how I kind of picked up a little bit of the Aussie stuff. And then this made more sense. And then I'm just like trying to like meld it all together to one image. I was watching a Gabriel Iglesias special, and he's talking about Steve Irwin discovering a Taliban. It was very interesting. But like, you could just take any subject, like, looky there, that's a tiger, one of the most dangerous predators on the planet. I'm gonna go poke it with a stick, kind of thing, and you just have fun with it. Of course, acting, you're gonna use it to make money or make movies and stuff, but you still have fun. Like, that's what gag reels are for, right? But today I was just doing some research on like what accents should I kind of focus on to build my repertoire and my skill set. And there was basically a group of polls done by viewers of films and TV and such. And then it was like top 10 worst performances or top 20 worst performances, right? It was all these worst performances polls to kind of reverse associate what's the most difficult accent but most popular that people want to hear authentic. And on the top was Great Britain English, in particular Yorkshire and Cockney. So kind of like like there's a load of us and only 2 of you, so piss off, right? Like kind of like you see your thugs on the street. The second was, surprisingly, was just the American accent. I'm like, American accent? What? And then I think about it, I'm like, there's some accents that different parts of America, I would even struggle trying to speak, I suppose. Because they break it down into 3 categories. You have Boston, your Southern accent. Because one thing that they describe about the Southern accent a lot of people get wrong is in the South when they're talking, because they describe it as it's so hot in the South that the person has to, they speak slower. Like they do everything slow in the South because it's hot. And you just don't want to be fast and hasty in the heat, which makes sense. So they don't hard pronounce, but they elongate vowel sounds. And when I kind of think of a Southern accent impersonation. It's actually Agent Bloomis out of the second Boondock Saints. I just enjoy her lines. She's such a sassy woman. Um, like, he's like, with all due respect, Agent. She's like, I wish you'd put special in front of Agent, because it just makes me feel special. And he's like, with all due respect, Special Agent Bloomis. I hate it when people use with all due respect because it's automatically followed by a disrespectful remark. Right? She's like, for example, detective. My jurisdiction pertains to anything I fucking say it does. Like, you get what I'm saying? We're sassy, right? But I, being a male, I obviously have different pitch qualities that I can control. There was a TikTok video, YouTube video a while back that I always kind of think about that makes me laugh. Is this kid's doing gun safety. He's talking about a shotgun and everything. His buddy's behind him, just walking through the field, but he steps into like a big rut and falls over and lands on his arm, and the shotgun goes off. So he's like, the first step in gun safety is keep your finger off the trigger unless you're ready to use it. And that's when his buddy steps into the rut, falls, a bang, and he just turns and he's like, well, god damn it, Clyde, what did I get in the trip, right? Like, this sounds hilarious. He's like, I'm sorry. He gets up with the shotgun and everything, but I love how, I don't know if that was staged or not, but if it wasn't, that's just prime opportunity capture right there on that camera. That was amazing. But that's like your Southern. And then the third would be your generic American accent. I guess like what I'm saying now. But that's another thing too, is everybody has a different way of pronouncing something. Even slight to not so slight. So for example, a lot of people, when they say a plural woman, they say women, right? For me, ever since I was young, when I tried to associate the plural word of woman, like I almost did right there, it's women. I say women, which sounds like W-E-M-E-N instead of W-O-M-E-N, right? But for me, that's how I made that distinction. That's a woman. Those are women, right? So if someone were to impersonate me, I don't know why they would, but if they did, they would say women. That'd be one way to capture my voice. But yeah, that's so my goal in the future is I'm going to be practicing more English. Particularly, I want to practice Michael Caine's English because I just enjoy his lines and his wisdom. Like, for me, it's funny. He created a Cockney blue-collar accent of the English language. But for me, I associate that as wisdom because I guess I come from a community where that 80-some-year-old blue-collar man's got more wisdom than you ever could. And so, like, when he says something, you should listen. That's law. So that makes sense to me that I guess I would associate his accent with wisdom. And some of the characters he plays are pretty smart people. Like when he's talking in The Prestige, he's talking about the different levels. Oh, sorry, excuse me. Different levels of delivering the magic and everything. Like the first act is blah, blah, blah. The second act, you know, he's doing his descriptions. So that's basically about all I really want to talk about too much. Is I'm just giving you guys an idea of what I'm practicing when it comes to accents. I'm trying to get an English accent down. I'm going to practice Boston, apparently. I can't do Boston. Or New Yorker. That's another one. New Yorker. A lot of my coworkers in this area are from New York. And in particular, one lady always reminded me that she was from Long Island. And instead of saying Long Island, Long Island. I'm like, okay. So you guys just blend the words together. That's not a big deal, right? Like, yeah, I'm going up to Long Island, you know. It's like, oh, cool. And like, Becky, look at her but it is just so big, right? I mean, I picture that as your California preppy Beverly Hills voice, right? But apparently that could be considered more the generic American accent. Other than that, Saturday I'm going to be making a video. My plan is I'm going to be doing A Few Good Men. I've been doing that, just non-professionally, if you will, or not professional in nature. But I'm going to be learning and trying to perfect the monologue of Jack Nicholson's "You Can't Handle the Truth," or as Colonel Jessup. And the reason being is part of my typecasting I want to do is I definitely can pull off military or police roles. I've been assumed to be military so many times I can't even count. And I have to keep telling them, no, I'm not in the military. I've tried for a long time, but no, I'm not. Like one time, I'm in the recruiting office, and I mean, it's partly in that case location, but I mean, I was a teenager at the time. I was like 17. I'm standing behind the desk, cleaning up or whatever, because the recruiter is still up at the Met facility, and a former Marine comes walking in, and he's like, "How is it, Marine?" And I turn looking at him, I'm like, "Sorry," I didn't realize he walked in and stuff. He was like, "Oh no, I just been out for a couple years, and I wanted to talk to another brother in the Corps. How's the Corps? How you doing?" And I'm like, "Stop!" I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" Like, I'm not in the Corps yet. No, I'm still a recruit. And he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I saw your haircut. I saw you stand behind the desk and everything." And I'm like, wow. I mean, I took that as a bit of a compliment of maybe not necessarily manifest destiny, but possible fate. But nope. Um, but I mean, a couple times I've been assumed to be military or law enforcement. So I figured, well, if an average day person would assume I could be in the military or law enforcement officer or whatever, maybe that gives me an advantage on fulfilling that role in acting in a movie or a TV show. Um, I actually applied for Montana State Police, the Highway Patrol, and that was a pretty long process, but I ended up not making the final candidate selection due to my terrible college credit, because I had terrible financial credit, which is fine. But so that's why I want to lock down the Jessup. You can't handle the truth, because there's nuances into that scene. The more you age and you learn about the nuances and the innuendos and everything, and people's what they say to you and stuff, it's interesting. Like, so the whole time in the trial was Cappy trying to land on his feet because he'd never been in trial before. He was an outside of trial lawyer, so that was interesting. What made him think it was rigged right away is, out of all of his cases he's done, his plea out ratio and stuff and everything, never once has he stepped foot in court. And he was personally decided to be the lead counsel on this. So he thought that was odd already. Like, okay, they're trying to stack the deck. The second thing is, when he went down and talked to Jessup in Cuba, I'm getting off track here. Anyway, I'll talk about that more on Saturday. And the second monologue I want to lock down, kind of the same character, but a way different personality, which can open up different roles for me as a good support character or sympathetic or empathetic character, is Ron Williams' character Sean in Good Will Hunting, when he's talking to Will in the park about what he'd never experienced, so he shouldn't have any actual authority speaking on it because he's only speaking from text. Like he was talking, he was like, I ask you about Michelangelo, you're going to talk about, his works, his political leanings, his relationship with the Pope. It's like, but you could never tell me what it smells like to stand in the Sistine Chapel. Look up and see that beautiful ceiling. His whole skip. So I want to get that down too, because he does put emotion in every line, of course, especially when he's talking about his wife and cancer and everything. So those are the two monologues I want to practice on most first, just because of the typecasting I'm trying to do. And then, like obviously I've already been doing, I kind of just describing my thought process of how I'm breaking down the scenes. And it's also helping me do that more often so I can be more analytical with things I've been watching instead of just getting in, because I'm a big person, I can get immersed into a film or TV and I just want to watch it for the entertainment value instead of sitting there and breaking down and watching it for the analytical. So that helps me create that as a routine because I'm a very routine oriented person. And I might do Major Pain just to entertain. Um, I've always done Major Pain or Spaceballs. Love those movies, but till now, I'm gonna sign off. And if you tune in, thank you. If not, you'll see me around, I'm sure. Um, but for now, I must say adieu.